You feeling stuck lately? Like life's passing you by? Get to know M.A.Y.A.
Acronym, My Ambition, Your Ambition.
Reconnect with your dreams, your goals, your ambitions. Find your motivation and start to live the life you desire. Explore the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast at MAYAAkai.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. As you know, we talk about all of those salient conversations that really address trying to get the best version of yourself. So pulling back the veil of self-doubt and self-sabotage and really digging deep into who you are to figure out who you want to be. And doing all those things are going to help you get to that journey. Well, this particular, which will not be episode 14 because it's going to be a 3-part series. It's a special edition, something that I really enjoy doing and I think has so much benefit to it, is we have a lot of young people who are embarking upon new adventures in their lives. They're going to college. And then someone said, well, M.A.Y.A, what about high school freshmen? They're equally challenges. So I'm going to kind of lateral some of that conversation in as well, because I think it's so important in today's climate and today's challenges to make sure that there isn't just that excitement about sending your child off to college without the proper tools to be successful. Because if you think about your college experience, it was about going to college. Everyone was happy that you were going, but you didn't necessarily have the tools that you needed to necessarily be successful. And that's what this 3-part series is going to be about. So you can listen to it and then go back and share it with your children. And or you can say, I want you to listen to this. This was really interesting and I think it's insightful. So opposed to me saying it to you, just take a listen to what she talks about and hopefully this will be something that will be helpful for you. So of course, I would tell you, get comfortable, find your spot. But this really isn't about you this time, even though for many of you, you might be empty nesters and you might be very excited about sending your children away to college. But at the same time, you yourself may have some anxiety and a little depression, just as they might, because it's the beginning of separation anxiety. So remember with the show, which was really key. Remember, I said you can always listen to former episodes of M.A.Y.A, just in case you're doing catch up. You can always find those episodes at MAYAAkai.com. And as always, with most episodes, there is companion resources. For this episode, for sure, the next 3, there's going to be companion resources. You go to MAYAAkai.com, click on podcast resources, and you can read through things, share them with your children. However, I'm sorry, we're not even going to call them children anymore. We're going to call them young adults. It's the big step forward in even how we perceive them and how they have to begin to perceive themselves. Language is everything, semantics, but it does matter a lot in how you proceed to do things with these young adults that really no longer are going to be under your wing. You're setting them free. So remember, you can go to MAYAAkai.com. Even in regards to listening to this episode or other episodes, you can always find me on iTunes, Google Play, and iHeartRadio platforms. Just search M.A.Y.A, as you see it, M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. And you can find me there and listen to episodes there as well if you don't want to go to MAYAAkai.com. Of course, I encourage everyone to get social with me. You can always find me at Maya_Akai on Twitter and Instagram, and Maya Akai Presents on Facebook. So those all things M.A.Y.A are located on my social media platforms as well. If you decide you want to weigh in and share something in the conversation, feel free to. Whenever you share comments on the page, it allows me to then share your comments right there with everybody else. So you may say something important. I'll be like, hey, this is worth sharing. And I can share it with everybody on the screen as well. Oh, it's so funny. After the broadcast, Maya's going to promote her Iowa Hawkeyes. No, I am not, because I'm still a little disgruntled with Iowa and how some things shook out. So no, I haven't even watched any college football, FYI, just so you'll know. Okay, so let's jump into, as I said, this is going to be a 3-part series. And how it's going to be a 3-part series is in this first episode, which is a special edition, as I said. It's going to be talking about the top 5 challenges that most college freshmen face. And like I said, I will definitely segue some conversation even about high school freshmen as well, because it is an equally complicated transition and one of the first life change experiences that we do have, moving from, being in grade school, junior high to high school, a bigger pond. more challenges. And it's the same thing with college. You know, you leave high school, it's a bigger pond, more challenges. So I will in there lateral some of the things I think are equally as important if you're dealing with a high school freshman as well in the conversation. Because someone brought it up, like, don't you think you should talk about this too? And you're right, because what I do tend to see a lot of in my job as a crisis intervention specialist in an emergency department is I do see a lot of high school students. So out of fairness, I will definitely share where I think this is worthy of mentioning. This can apply to high school freshmen as well. So as I said, special edition 3-part series. First, the top 5 challenges that college freshmen face. And then the next 2 will dig really deeper. I'm going to have a behavioral analyst on. It's going to talk about really deeply like the social adjustments and the self-identity piece that really play out in college, that really shape that next part of your adulthood and those challenges that do exist. And, you know, granted, it might be different than when you were a college student, but there's a lot of similarities. And then the third episode will be that financial piece, because many of us, raise your hand if you made a lot of really poor choices in college in regards to how you either spent money, misspent money, credit cards, the whole 9 yards. But also that individual is going to talk about how you can begin to help your child not just have, young adults, have financial literacy, but things that you can start doing right now that when they're done with college, that will put them and give them a financial edge. There's lots of tricks to the trade that people don't know that you can be helping your young adult to actually take a step forward when they get that diploma from a standpoint of financial literacy as well as their credit. Things that most people will never tell you about. That will be the third episode that we will jump in and talk about. So that's a 3-part special edition series that's going to be focused on our college freshmen. And like I said, here and there, I will plug in, well, I do believe this also applies to high school freshmen as well. So the top 5 challenges that generally face most college students, and some of these a little bit with high school students, are academic difficulty, homesickness, social adjustment, picking a major, and dealing with financial issues. Those are the 5 things that tend to be the issues that they struggle with the most, which can end up causing anxiety, depression, all kinds of things. So the goal is to discuss what these things look like, but then to end the episode with talking about ways that these 5 challenges can be combated and give solutions to share with your young adults and or your high school freshmen where applicable. So let's start talking about academic difficulty. It's one of the most common transitional challenges for college freshmen, even high school freshmen, because there's an upgrade in difficulty and expectation in college classes or high school coursework. It's really interesting because, let's be honest, there's a lot of hand-holding when you go from junior high to high school. And then when you go from high school to college, there's no hand-holding. There is no one's going to check if you did your homework, if you turned it in, and if you were even in class. You automatically in college will fail instantaneously because you are absolutely independent and autonomous. The difference with high school students is that they're not independent and autonomous yet. So parents are still notified by email, mail, when a child is failing, homework's not being turned in. There's so many ways now with technology that parents are notified. So you still have the ability to work with your child to get them on track if they're struggling. On the flip side, in college, and here comes the independence and autonomy piece is huge, your child literally is looked at as an adult. So you as the parent cannot contact the school and ask anything about your child's academic success or failure. Your child actually has to share that with you, which can be complicated because you can think everything is great because your child is still at school until you start having a conversation about them returning home because they failed out. So the school, when you get to university level, does not have the obligation to tell you what's actually going on with your child. And this is why you need to have the conversation about having them to understand that, yes, you do have independence and autonomy, and you don't have to necessarily tell me anything. But at the same time, please don't come to me when the wheels have come off the bus and then you didn't give me an opportunity to actually support you the way that you needed. I'm not trying to make decisions for you because I would hope at this point I have instilled in you the character and qualities that you need to be successful. Does that mean you're not going to make mistakes? Absolutely not. You'll still make some bad choices because, mistakes are the only thing you can truly call your own. But don't dig a hole so deep and then you come to me when we can't right the ship. That's the conversation that has to happen. So yes, enjoy your independence, enjoy your autonomy, because I obviously can't control the things you're doing when you're away from me. But also that comes with a certain level of responsibility. Understand with that academic difficulty, a large part of that is transition anxiety and uncertainty and change. So it's always really interesting for college students, especially when they're coming out the gates, is that the how will I do in the class? Because it's interesting. We pay like thousands and thousands of dollars to send our children to college to only repeat classes they've already taken several times throughout their lifetime. Math courses get a little bit more complicated. They add more information to it. You'll see chemistry again, history. So a lot of this stuff you're rehashing. So to be honest, if you paid attention the first time through, you're probably going to do good in most of your classes until you get to more major or higher level of math classes. So with that being said, if you had, and I always tell people, you have to know your child. Some people get so excited about the idea of sending their child to college, they instantly are setting them up for failure because, to be honest, they weren't really good high school students. So I'm going to ask you a question. If you did not have a good high school student, what in God's name makes you believe they go to college and they change that behavior? Because chances are they're not going to. There's just more freedom to do what they want to do and not be underneath your thumb. So the key thing is, if your children did not have good study habits, let's just say in junior high, now is a good time to start working on it in high school if college is their goal. Sometimes junior college is far more appropriate and cost effective for more people than they want to acknowledge. It isn't, let's say, as glorious, and it isn't as sexy academically when you go to a junior college. But most people are finding that financially it makes sense. You complete 2 years, you have an associate's, and then you can go forth and go to a 4-year university. And the good part of it is you've seen academic success because they completed what they needed to. But more importantly, there's a bit more maturity under their belt. They probably have worked, they've been in classes, they've achieved some things where you can feel comfortable. So there's always that interesting road is what kind of student that you have raised in your household. So you should know that yes, there's going to be times where they may not go to class in college, but is it going to be a problem? If you had a child that had truancy issues, chances are they're probably not going to college and you're looking for some other option. Junior colleges can be viable. Very much so. So the bottom line is there is that uncertainty and change, whereas, like I said, teachers aren't going to ask you for your homework. When you pass it in, if it's not there, and most stuff is submitted online at this point, if you didn't do it, they're not going to ask you where it is. And one of the things that you have to engage your college student in before they left, and most of them are gone by now, is that no one's going to be checking for you except for you. And if you fail to do the things that you need to do, you're going to fail out. And it's important to say, as much as you want this autonomy and independence, and I'm happy to let you have it. Don't think that I'm not going to miss you because separation anxiety is real. I also need you to know there comes a responsibility. It's incumbent that you go to class, that you turn your homework in. I'm not saying that the social aspect isn't important, because it is, but don't get caught up in the riffraff. How many people can honestly say, and I remember this in my undergrad at Iowa, I remember watching the amount of people that would not go to class. And they would sit in the union, as most schools have. And I was like, well, why aren't you going to class? And they were like, and I thought, oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you who did go to class, because I was there on a scholarship and I couldn't afford to lose that. I just wasn't going to do it. So one of those habit forming things about academic difficulty is your young adult cannot match themselves to others. With high school students, it's more about helping them to get a good study pattern in place, something that can carry over with them when they decide to go to college. Setting that habit in place is huge for them. So let's move on to the second. And this is the one that can be complicated for parents and for students alike. And it's ultimately the homesickness. It's separation anxiety, because even though you have a lot of young people that are itching and scratching to get away from home, what they honestly miss is, being comfortable in their own space, the cooking, the support, the overall comfort, the little things. So even though they clearly seek out independence, they miss the fact that someone generally cares about their well-being. Someone is checking in on what's going on with them, especially if you are a very highly involved parent. Let's say you had a kid who was into sports or some type of, different clubs, and you were always taking them places, checking in, going to see them actually, play their game. It's interesting because if they're playing college, chances are you won't get to be at most of their games. And trust me, they'll know that you're not there. I mean, that support is huge for a lot of kids. And if you happen to have a relationship with your child where you were really close, there's a high probability they're going to be very homesick, especially if you did a lot of stuff together. Like if they were more interested in hanging out with you than their friends sometimes, or they didn't have a lot of friends until you spent time together, that adjustment will be difficult for them because the person who wasn't just their primary support, but also was to a degree their social interaction piece. And I know some people that were like that, and their children struggled when they went away to school because that wasn't the person they were talking to daily, even though they would still call home and talk daily. So just know that homesickness piece, which is separation anxiety, not to mention, it's also a change in environment, not just from home, but from what you know and familiarity, which means most people are not going to school with their friends. So now they walk into a new situation and they know no one. You're lucky. Now, actually, when I went to undergrad, I knew several people. So it wasn't like I walked into not knowing people, which was nice, but I still was okay with meeting other people. In my own strange extroverted way, I'm a social butterfly. It's odd, but I can be. But for some young adults, having to forge new friendships can be complicated. And that's one of the things I hope you red flagged about your child if you notice they didn't do good with social interactions, because that's the area where they're going to need support, not to be afraid to meet new people and to try new things. So the homesickness piece isn't just about family not being there. It's a new environment with new people and not having the constants of the people you talk to all the time, like your friend. Sometimes it's boyfriends and girlfriends. That can be challenging. And a lot of young adults, I'm sure in many ways we were the same, think they're absolutely, without a doubt, in love with the person they're dating in high school. And a lot of their angst in separation is being away from that person. They're so concerned the relationship isn't going to work. You're going to cheat on me. And they're so focused on that. Sometimes that first semester or so, they don't adjust well because their thoughts and feelings are more invested in that relationship than their individual success. So in some situations, if you know you happen to have a young adult that's like that, find ways to lend support and to talk to them about it. Like, if things are going to work, and trust me, they don't want to hear you say this, it will work, but you still should not negate your college experience. So there's lots of different reasons why homesickness can come into play. The social adjustment piece, I can only tell you, everybody can tell you had it when you had your freshman year in college, and it also exists your freshman year in high school. That social aspect of college can be rewarding and it can be complicated because at the same time, if you have a young adult who is not afraid to step outside the box, meet new people, then they're going to just thrive in college most of the time because there's so many different ways to meet people, whether it be social clubs, you tend to forge friends because of your roommate, someone you're in class with. There's so many ways that you can meet people in college. And what's different about college versus high school is that there is more of an openness in college to get to know others than there often is in high school. And part of the reason with high school being so high anxiety for a lot of young individuals, as I said, I would rope in some conversation about high school freshmen as well, because someone brought it up, is because in high school, you still have a certain amount of kids that are transitioning with people that they know. So they may be coming from a junior high and going all to the same high school. So they're not having to forge new relationships with people. And that identity that they have actually forged with that group of people, it transitions over with them. Now, it doesn't mean it's not going to change because, it tends to in some situations. Whereas college, you're entering into a situation where you often know no one. And you make friends because you have to by circumstance. So it's two different situations from a maturity standpoint. If you happen to have a high school freshman, and this is where it's complicated, I often say I think that high school kids are some of the meanest kids around. The whole mean girl thing, I literally, when I have so many of my high school students that will come into the ER, because of depression, anxiety, suicide. Oh, and by the way, I didn't want to start with it, but I'll go ahead and plug it in now because I think it's equally important to talk about it because it's a word that you probably have heard, and hopefully you heard about this today. Today is World Suicide Prevention Day. And the reason it probably has more importance than it has in the past is because of the fact of with COVID-19 and the pandemic, a lot of people are under a lot of depression and anxiety. And then you couple that with the social unrest we're experiencing currently in our country, and it's very complicated. Why I always say it's important to never play down depression and anxiety because everyone doesn't have the same level of coping skills. So I noticed today that there was a lot more notation about it being World Suicide Prevention Day. than probably in the past. But I think it has a lot to do with the pandemic. Often, unfortunately, I do see a very high amount of high school students in my job. Either it's suicidal ideation, like they're thinking about it because they're struggling to make the transition, to find adjustment, to figure out where they should be or who they are. And there's a lot of depression and anxiety that they have. We do know within regards to suicide research and statistics, believe it or not, men are more likely to commit suicide than women. So I also want to say men always have this very stoic presentation that they're okay and they suffer in silence because we have a society that makes men believe that they can't show their emotions. So especially if you have a son, not to say that daughters aren't important, be mindful if you see shifts and changes, isolation, they become withdrawn. If you see sweeping changes in your child in high school, and remember in episode maybe 1 or 2 somewhere in there, it might have been 3, I did a thing about depression. I specifically talked about being able to identify depression in teens. Some of the key signs that you will see changes in appetite, sleep, they'll become more withdrawn. You know when your child has changed. They may become more angry. And it's important, especially with high schoolers, when you see that change, to be open and willing to address it with them, opposed to behaving as if it's not happening. Because the key thing is, a lot of times, especially with high schoolers, there's that beginning of wanting to be independent and they don't want to discuss if they're struggling. But you know your child at that point well enough to know that something isn't okay. And it's important to sit down and say, hey, so how is, and this is a different time because it's e-learning for a lot of students. So you're actually seeing how this is affecting them. And it's okay to say, so how are things going with e-learning? I know, right? You'd rather be chatting, Snapchatting, you'd rather be doing, surfing online, buying something. But unfortunately for now, we got to do it this way. Anything I can help you with? Take breaks. It's complicated. So just let them know, here's one thing that a lot of kids can identify with, especially high schoolers right now. Showing a little bit of vulnerability. That you equally are having some issues, can let them know that, okay, you know what? Okay, it isn't just me. And a lot of young individuals realize that the world around them, that the struggle is real for everybody. But seeing that vulnerability from those that you look up to, those who support you, can help them to navigate those waters. Because you could say, this frustrates me, but this is how I deal with it. So what's going on with you? How are you dealing with it? Anything I can help with? Okay, cool. Just let me know. Staying connected is so key. It's a little different if you're that college student that's away or even one that's at home, because you can't see the depression or the anxiety, because you may call them and they may say, oh, everything's okay. But if you notice they're avoiding your calls, you're having a hard time getting a hold of them, it could be because they're having a great time, but that also means how focused are you? It's always important to check their temperature. One of the things that we talk about, and this applies big time to our young adults and children, is the emotional intelligence piece, which we all know EI is that ability to perceive, control, and evaluate emotions. Now, mind you, we get better at that as we mature. But I also believe as adults in many of our children and young adults' life, we can give them the edge that we didn't have about emotional intelligence. So only if you say to them, something, emotional intelligence is so key. And in high school, people are going to push your buttons and it's going to make you feel a certain way. And it's important that when someone pushes your button, you know that it's been pushed, because it either makes you feel angry, anxious, insecure, whatever it is. And the minute you feel that, the first question you should be asking yourself is, why am I feeling this way? Why does that make me feel that way? Now, mind you, for a teen, that might be a bit overwhelming to identify why they feel that way. But by them learning to process that, is something that prepares them to have better emotional intelligence when they do get to college. So they're working on this throughout their high school years. And trust me, your EI in high school is awful, because you never feel good enough. You get challenged. You don't feel pretty. You feel fat. You're not good enough at your sport. You suck at school. Teenagers have more angst than I have ever seen in my entire life. But I do believe the world dumps so much on them. I say that young, children, teens are bombarded with so many images. And if they don't have the parent that helps them to navigate those waters, they're trying to process all that information on their own. So I always say that today teens are overly sexualized. It drives me crazy. I'm going to say this. And this is when I realized I had officially turned into an old person. So I know when I listened to music when I was like in my 20s and even 30s, like profanity totally didn't bother me. Now I like will turn the channel and go to somewhere where someone's not cursing. Seriously. Because I'm like, oh, God, that's too much. I'm going to be honest. The song with Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B does not sit well with me. I was like, okay. I said, this is too much. I said, now mind you, I was like, but wasn't this what 2 Live Crew was doing? But here was the difference for me. It's just extra to me now because I'm older. But the difference of why when I heard things like 2 Live Crew or NWA, and let's say they were very sexually explicit or they were bashing women, do you realize the whole time when they talked negatively, I never thought they were talking about me. I just assumed they were having experience with certain types of people, and that's who they were talking about. You know why I thought that way? Because I was nurtured by my mother and my grandmother to understand being a young girl and my value and my worth. Those were things I were getting from day one, even through childhood, going through teens. So by the time I made it to college, from an identity standpoint, I was pretty stable. I will tell you this, though. I do believe that I was a little kind of apprehensive, whereas a lot of people I found in college were far more adventurous than I was. When I think back on this, there are certain things I just would not get involved in because I was like, oh, I'm not doing that. No. And every now and then I say, I kind of feel like maybe I missed a fun train here and there because I was being a little rigid in my thinking. But that rigid in my thinking allowed me to finish college and go on to do other things. So I think it's important that this identity piece, especially in high school, start working with your teens to help them to establish even more who their identity is, what they like, what they don't like, what makes them happy, what makes them angry. When situation happens that are negative, how you choose to help them understand that situation is going to be really important, because this emotional intelligence piece will be the thing making their transition to college so much more easier if they have a better understanding about how they feel, when they feel, why they feel, but more importantly, being able to flip that coin and understand that about other people. They'll interact with people a lot better that way. So I'm always saying, take that emotional intelligence out your toolbox, help your kids in high school learn how to get that tool to put in their toolbox so they can take that toolbox to college with them. All right, because social adjustment is very challenging. It's rewarding and complicated because you can feel like you know who you are as a person. But remember, you get to college and this freedom is I can come home anytime I want. I can party. I can drink. I can do all kinds of stuff. I can go to class. You have to learn how to strike the balance between academics and the social side. Because I always tell people, college isn't just about academics. The social piece of what you learn about yourself is so important. It's a big growth point. I got very involved in student government. I was the president of the Black Student Union for like 3 years. When I was there, Rodney King happened. And I'm going to tell you something. Watching how people interacted and how situation unfolded, and as being a leader, how I had to get involved and figure out how to handle things was a huge growth point for me. Here's the interesting thing. Encourage your child to do intramural sports. If let's say they played sports in high school, but they can't do it in college, intramural sports are a great outlet to have. You can meet people who have similar interests. I found out quickly, though, it wasn't for me because those people were a little too intense. I just wanted to go have fun. I think a lot of those girls were angry because they weren't playing on the team. I was like, yeah, no, you're trying to fight. What's wrong with you? So I'm just saying, but intramural sports, huge. I took dance classes because dance was my passion. College provides the outlets to do so many things that you're truly interested in at such a higher level. But a lot of times, college freshmen are not told that. They're given a direction a little different. So that's why I'm saying that social adjustment can be complicated, but it can be so rewarding. So remember in previous conversations, before we move on from social adjustments, we talked about attachment styles and communication styles. More importantly, no one probably ever talked to your young adult about their attachment styles. Were they secure? Were they avoidant and anxious? It depends. A lot of high schoolers actually take psychology classes. So I'm not sure how much they process it, but they've heard these concepts before. But your child's attachment style can be huge. If they walk away to college being secure, It doesn't mean they're not going to make mistakes, but it means they'll make often better decisions because they're not going to feel like they're negating everything about themselves. But if they are anxious and they have a hard time trusting people and they want to fit in, that becomes a really difficult road to tread when you're constantly trying to always fit in with people opposed to trying to be yourself. That makes college a really difficult experience. It makes it complicated. Communication styles. If you know you have a child that's assertive and can say what they think and feel, that's great. Versus if you have a passive aggressive young adult who won't say what they think, they'll kind of throw it at you sideways. These are all things that are going to, really involved in the high school experience as much as a college experience. So being able to say, I don't particularly care for that for this reason. And I've met some young adults like that. I've met some teenagers that can tell you what they think. They don't take any smack, and that's great. And there are others that are timid and shy, and they're so afraid to say what they feel, and they're afraid to trust people because the way that they were parented did not provide that type of nurturing and support. Where things start in your childhood, we talked about this, that path you take through adulthood doesn't have to stay the same. If you're willing to address the things that you feel deficient in or make you feel insecure, to grow and to change. So by previous conversations, meaning other episodes of M.A.Y.A, remember you can always go to MAYAAkai.com and listen to all previous episodes as well as iTunes, Google Play, and iHeart platforms. And you can listen to shows there as well. And remember, there's always podcast resources located on MAYAAkai.com for most of the episodes. So you can go in and get some additional reading things that I think can be helpful. But those things, the reason I share them with you now is because most people don't actually want to look inward, but they don't know why they feel stagnant or why they're unhappy. Well, because happiness comes from within. It does not come from outside. And that's something sometimes that unfortunately we don't learn until we become adults. And I want to help you help your young adult or your teens to be ahead of the curve to get to happiness. So you can take all the things you're learning with me through M.A.Y.A and share them with your teens or young adults. I would tell them to listen to the episodes. I'm just not sure how engaging I would be for them. But that's the only reason. But if you feel brave and you think they might get something from it, then sure, send them, say, hey, just listen to this. I get something from it. And I just thought maybe, a little insight, because the world can be complicated. And this is a little insight on some stuff that I thought might be interesting for you. And they may be like, whatever, Mom, go away. Whatever, Dad, be quiet. And then they might go listen. All right. The fourth challenge often, and this is more about college than high school, is picking a major. Many students enter into college feeling a parental or self-inflicted pressure to pick a major and a career path right away. Okay, how many people right now who went to college are actually working in their field? We always have this dream of what we want to do without having any real experience to know we want to do it. Now, what I think can be a bit more advantageous for teens and young adults is they often have been giving more access to do things that we weren't. So I decided I wanted to be a broadcast major. And to believe it or not, I did respectfully work in that field. Not to the extent I should have, but for reasons that I'll talk about down the road that can help your children not make the same mistake, or your young adult. So a lot of times teens and young adults, they had like broadcasting studios in school. They were podcasting through classes. There's broadcasting classes. There's always different outlets. There's STEM stuff. They're just very hands-on. So they're getting to do the things that we thought we wanted to do only because we learned a little bit about those fields. So I think the advantage comes to current society and many teens getting a little bit of exposure. So if you had a teen who was passionate about something and stuck with it, and that's kind of the major they went with, and it makes sense. But don't put the pressure on them. A lot of times parents are so excited about their kids going to college that they're like, well, what you going to major in? It's okay if you're a liberal arts major because you don't know what you want to do yet. Because let's be honest, the first 2 years of your college career, you're just taking a lot of the general education things all over again. Now, mind you, you can throw a course in there where you can experience some things and say, oh, that kind of piqued my interest. I took that psychology class. I think I want to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a counselor. So a lot of your coursework will spark interest. But if they don't go in the door knowing what they want to do, they should not feel as if they're not making the right choice. Because 18, who knows what they really want to be? And like I said, I knew more people who changed majors or not even working in their respective field because it wasn't something that they honestly wanted to do. They just didn't know it at the time. So it's important to take the pressure off and say, you know what, if you don't know what you want to do right now, it's okay. Just take your gen eds and, kind of get a feeler. We'll talk a bit how they can start to process that better to make sure they make a choice that really resonates. On the flip side, though, please don't have one of those kids who's going to say to you, going away to college, well, I want to be I'm an art teacher or a gym teacher. No. Or a music teacher. No. Because the problem with that is we know those aren't jobs that are viable. And you would be setting them up for failure, letting them have a major like that, knowing that when they probably finish, most art classes, music classes are being eliminated from most schools. So what exactly are they going to do? Now, then that's when the conversation about double majoring comes in. Like, you can double major, but you need to find something else, because this is when you send your teen or young adult into doing some research. Like, you go look at the statistics and you go look at how many jobs are available for that to make sure it makes sense. Because, not to be mean, I'm not trying to support you your entire life because you chose a major that really wasn't viable. Believe it or not, a lot of parents get so excited that their kids are attending college, they don't bother to tell them that the major they're picking doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, if they're insistent on it, then you really can't do anything about it unless you're paying for it. Then you might say, well, my money's not going there, so you better go find something else because I'm not paying for that. But it's important to make sure they get the guidance, but more important, get information that helps them make decisions. Everybody's not going to be a rap star. I've done several career days, and do you know how many teens, like juniors and seniors, are like, oh, I want to go to school because I want to be a rap star? I'm like, I get it. Vine, all these things get opportunity. But the thing is, you didn't have to go to college to do those things. It's this idea of what it means to be a musician, and not even in a musician in the sense that we know. I'm like, well, you can still do those things without paying a whole lot of money for college to do it. Maybe you need to pursue that and not go to college and figure out what's best for you. Attend a junior college. That's the kind of advice I give people when they start telling me stuff like they want to be a rap star or an actor, an actress or something. I'm like, the percentage of people that make that cut, it's like an athlete, a pro athlete, what, 2 to 3% of athletes that, kind of start through high school even make it to the pros, to be honest. So it might be a dream, but the thing is, it may not turn into reality. And that's the role of adults, to help our young ones to be supportive, but to keep things in perspective. 5, the 5th challenge that's out there that a lot of, I would say, high school freshmen, they want to spend more money and they don't have a sense of financial literacy at this point because they've been often given mostly what they want and they can't work. So I know that they don't have a sense of understanding money very well, even though you can still teach financial literacy even before your child actually has a job. I'll give you a good example. There's a neighbor my mother has who is just turning 16 and no, she's 17. She's a landscaping business. And she went door to door in our neighborhood and said, I have a landscaping business. She had a flyer and business cards and said, I noticed, you have a large yard. Would you like me to do your landscaping? Gave my mom a quote. They put up a schedule. She actually has 2 or 3 people who work for her. She's 17 because of how much work she has. Her parents actually bought her a pickup truck because she's doing so much work. And the thing is, she's passionate about it. When we had all those major storms and the trees all came down, she went around house to house and said, do you need me to clear those branches, cut them down and get them ready for pickup? That's what I'm talking about. That's ambitious. I mean, it's thinking outside the box. I think that kind of autonomy to me is amazing to have that wherewithal, but it's her passion. But she has a different sense of financial awareness that I think is interesting. So one thing often about freshman students is they worry about money, and money is a big challenge for them. They often don't know how to spend it responsibly, or they overspend. It's so easy in college to do that. I remember, and I don't know if it still happens, and I hope it doesn't. And if it does, I hope every parent has had the conversation that credit card companies were like sharks for college students. You could get a credit card. You could get a couple of them as a freshman with no income. Now, mind you, they wouldn't give you these crazy limits. They might only be $500, so you weren't digging yourself in a huge hole. But the problem was, if you didn't pay them, now you were already ruining your credit without realizing what the ideal of credit is, because it's something that's often not talked about, because financial literacy in many communities is not something that's properly discussed. So you have for instance, a freshman in college who will order a pizza and charge it. Well, what you thought was an $18 pizza, based on interest, you probably paid closer to $32 for it because you didn't think about the interest you were paying for something. So that's the kind of stuff that a lot of college freshmen are not aware of how they misspend their money. And I'll be honest, high schoolers know better. They ask for a lot of things and parents often give it to them without explaining the value of a dollar. And that's something that You can start in high school with making your teen understand money and that it doesn't grow on trees. But often parents will just give, and the kid has no understanding of money. And that becomes a greater issue, not just as they're in college, but as they go on into adulthood, because they don't get how money works. Okay, so what can result from these 5 challenges? And we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. Anxiety and depression. So let's talk about how to address these challenges head on, because I think it's so important to know that anxiety and depression, as I said, today is World Suicide Prevention Day. And I'm not saying it gets to that, but a lot of times there's been a high percentage of increase in suicide in teens. And often it has to do with depression and anxiety. And this is why it's so important. I would encourage you to go back and listen to that episode. It might be 3 about depression, because I get into not just understanding maybe if you're depressed, but the teen portion of it is important, because it talks about signs and symptoms of what you can become aware of as you're kind of eyeballing your teen, that freshman who's getting all this new challenges, trying to make new friends in some cases, old friendships may be changing, a lot of different expectations. And so I think it's so important to go back and listen to that, just to get the heads up on what depression looks like for adults versus what it looks like for teens. It's a worthy listen to me. Thank you, Nathan Williams. I appreciate you tuning into the show. So let's talk about how to address those challenges, how to confront them. And it doesn't mean this is going to be easy. It doesn't mean that this is a slam dunk, because academic difficulty is just that. It's academical difficulty. There's always going to be, those challenges are ahead. But more importantly, change is ahead. And the thing is, getting your young adult or teen comfortable with the idea of challenge and change. Challenge doesn't mean it's necessarily negative. It just means it's something that's maybe not an expectation that you didn't know was coming, but there's a shift in something that needs to be done. If you look at challenge as a shift in something that needs to be done versus a difficult task that I don't want to do, because remember, as I always say, as your focus goes, your energy will follow. So if you take a situation and all you do is wrap it in negativity and put a nice big nasty bow on it, why do you think unwrapping that is even going to be simple or something you want to do? It's about the perspective you put things in. So if a situation changes, look at why it changed, how much of it influences you, how it impacts you, and how you can make the adjustment. Those of us that learn how to adjust early in life will tend to be happier and to achieve the things we want, because we don't look as adjustment as an inconvenience. Getting out of comfort zones. Eventually, when we get out the college series, we will start talking about comfort zones, because believe it or not, there's a whole kind of method to the madness about comfort zones and how to navigate it so you get the most from it. So let's talk a bit about the challenges ahead, changes ahead, and how to help your young, your teen, maybe your freshman in high school, or you might have a sophomore that's struggling, or your freshman in college, how to help them to navigate that. So when we talk about academic difficulty, stick to a set schedule. It is pretty much the one thing that worked for most high school students. In high school, remember, it offered set class schedules, structured study halls, which helped students stay on top of their academic obligations. Remember, I said the first thing that happens to you in college is independence and autonomy comes running into your face, and it says, hey, you've been waiting for this. There's no one to tell you to wake up early, when to go to bed, asking you if you did your homework. You get to decide that. And a lot of teens do what they're supposed to do because of that obligation is put in place, the structure. And schools are checking. Your parents get emails or letters when you're not going to school, you're truant. They're being told when you're failing. And hence things are put in place that try to help you to navigate that. And hopefully you're a parent that you can. Every now and then you get a kid who is just going to be bumper cars for 4 years. And I met parents like that. And I feel for them, but there's often so much going on beyond the academic issue that's creating the issue for the child. The academic part is just more stress. It's social issues, it's things in the home. There's a lot of depression and anxiety going off when you get pushback. But the key thing to know with academic difficulty in college, that freedom is the very thing that can be your enemy. So when you tell that young adult, hey, you know something, one of the first things I need you to do is, stick to a schedule. Make sure you do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. always go to class. Well, the first rule of thumb is don't miss a single class. Don't sleep in. And here's one better. When a college freshman is setting their schedule, let's be honest, this is where their autonomy and control can actually work to their benefit. So if they're not a morning person, if you had that teen that struggled to get out of bed, there's plenty of college courses to start later in the morning or in the afternoon or even evening, which allows them to kind of get their flow together. So you can say, hey, you struggled in the morning, so don't get an 8 o'clock class if you don't have to, so then you won't be missing that class. Make sure that maybe you get a 10 o'clock class instead and you'll be able to make it to that class. So that's one thing they can do to help them stick with the schedule, because the first thing is stick with the schedule and go to class, but set a schedule that you actually know you can stick to. A lot of times, here's the thing, in college, you get a counselor who has a very heavy caseload and not really thinking about you. They'll often put you in classes you don't necessarily want and don't give you a schedule that's conducive to kind of where you're at mentally and emotionally with your academia. A lot of teens aren't morning people. As you know, your circadian rhythm actually goes backwards when you become a teen. You want to stay up all night and sleep all day. And their lives actually are opposite of that. So now there's an opportunity in college for, if you're not a day person, you can do nights and vice versa. So, I think it's key. Thank you for sharing, Arthur Hill. Night classes saved your academic life. And it's really true. So just work to your strengths in setting that schedule when you're doing this. The next thing is the homesickness part. We know that a lot of kids tend to get homesick. We know it. But the key thing is knowing your feelings are normal. And a big step in dealing with homesickness is to acknowledge how you feel. I miss my mom. I miss my dad. I miss my dog. I miss my cat. I miss my boyfriend. I miss my friends. It's okay. That first semester in college is difficult. It's independence you want, but it does come with a cost. Comfort, control, and convenience looks a lot different for you at that time. So just know that homesickness is hard. I get it. But when we talk about how we can deal with that, a couple things we should do. Avoid going home on the weekends. That's key. Don't go until there's a real break where you should go. Get out of your room, go out, meet people, work out, stay active, make friends. And you're absolutely right about this, Arthur, that icebreakers, they're the devil. But the thing is, you have so many opportunities to meet people in college, whether it's your roommates, you're going to meet people in class. The thing about college is everybody's fresh and new and your buddies aren't with you. So it's a little bit easier to meet people because of that reason. When we talk about social adjustment, and this is when we're moving on beyond homesickness and all that stuff, the key thing about social adjustment is get involved in campus life. Encourage new experiences. That's what college is all about. Like I said, if you love sports in high school, but you're not playing at the collegiate level, you can do intramural sports. Take a dance class, take a basket weaving class, join social clubs, get involved in student government. That still exists. At the college level, there's so many opportunities to do new things that can be so much different. We talked about picking a major. And one of the things I said is that don't feel overwhelmed. You must do it. But here's a key thing. Meet your counselor and get to know them. Talk about what your interests are. Visit your career services department. Learn more about internships that might exist. Things like that, work opportunities on campus that might kind of put you within the flow, what you're looking for. Chat with your instructors that teaches courses of interest for you to be like, so tell me more about your field. What do you do? That may help you to do something, but more importantly, get a mentor. This doesn't all happen maybe within the first semester, but these are things that can help you to make the adjustment. Dealing with financial issues is always more complicated. So the best way to help, let's say your college freshman, is set a weekly budget. Set a weekly budget. So tell them, because they're not going to work the first semester, probably say, I'm only giving you $50 a week. You better use it wisely because I'm not sending you any more. Be mindful of purchases using credit cards. In fact, don't even give them a credit card. If you give them a debit card, it's a limited amount of funding and they have to be aware of it. But make sure they begin to understand financial literacy. Like why buying a pizza on a credit card makes no sense. Why you don't need extra stuff or just spending money without thinking twice about it. And believe it or not, getting a job is good for money and time management. Those are the 5 challenges that often are difficult for high school freshmen. And we talked mainly about college freshmen. Feel free to share this if you've got someone, if you've got a young teen or you've got that young adult out there. And remember, all episodes of Maya can be found at MAYAACAI.com, as well as the iTunes Store, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. Remember, get social with me. You can find me at Maya_Akai at Instagram, as well as Twitter. M.A.Y.A presents on Facebook. But like I said, all my episodes, you can find them pretty much anywhere. So feel free to have this discussion or to share accordingly with your young adult. That means your college freshman, we're using new language, or your adolescent, your teen who might be a freshman in high school. Okay, everybody, make sure you tune in for, this is a 3-part series. The next one's going to be when I'm having a behavioral analyst come on the show and talk about those real challenges about that forging that identity you have in college. And we'll also talk about those challenges that do exist for high schoolers as well. That's going to be the second episode. And 3 is that financial literacy piece I talked about, how to help them become more aware, how to be more financial literate, and how you can also help to set up your college freshmen to be in a better financial place when they're done in 4 years. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode of Maya. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Have a good one.
Get inspired, get motivated with Maya Akai and the Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find Maya on Twitter and Instagram at Maya_Akai. On Facebook at Maya Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything Maya at MAYAAkai.com.